Hello, Tiziana from Rome is visiting London for the first time. She writes an email to her German friend, Emma. Although Tiziana's English is pretty good, she uses some words which don't mean what she thinks they mean. Let's read it together and see if you can spot the words. Now, on second thoughts, Amber, can you read the email for us?
Okay, Bruce. Here goes. Ciao, Irma. How are you? I arrived in London yesterday. I didn't pretend that my first day here would be so strange. After I checked into the hotel, I decided to go shopping. I wanted to buy a morbid jumper for my sister. I asked the receptionist, but he couldn't help. I think his English isn't good. He's probably a stranger. Anyway, none of the shops had morbid jumpers, so I went back to the hotel. On the way, I saw a man trying to rob a shop. I made a photo of him when he ran away. He had an important nose and a dark carnation. When the police arrived, I told them that I had assisted the robbery and they immediately took me to the police station. At first they were very rude, but after a while, they became more sympathetic, especially after I showed them the photo. They let me go. People are very strange here. In the evening I went to the cinema, but I didn't enjoy the film. It was very noisy, and I almost fell asleep. Anyway, I'll write again soon. TZ.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode, which is about false friends. What are they? How did they evolve? And what, if anything, we can do about them? If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like and subscribe buttons. And why not share it with your friends? If you don't enjoy this episode, please share it with your enemies. Okay, I started this episode with an example from Italian, basically because apart from English, it's the language I'm most familiar with, and so it's easier for me to find examples quickly. But I will be looking at false friends from a variety of languages around the world. Okay, as we can see from Tiziana's email, all the false friends are basically a word from another language which seems to be similar to a word in your own language. And in most cases, these words have the same meaning, or a meaning that is pretty close. So to give you an example, when we're dealing with Italian, difficult in English and difficile in Italian mean the same thing. However, sometimes the meanings can be slightly different or even completely different. Before going into the details, let's see what Tiziana really wanted to say. Right, here are the parts of Tiziana's email with the false friends underlined. Naturally, these are false friends between English and Italian. We'll look at other languages later, as I said. So the first one is I didn't pretend. Now, we obviously know what pretend means in English, but of course she is taking pretendere, the Italian verb, to mean expect or to have an expectation. And so she should have said, I didn't expect that my first day would be so strange. However, the next one, I love it. Morbid jumper. Now we know what morbid means in English, but I think she's confusing with morbido, the Italian adjective which means soft, a soft jumper. Morbid in Italian is morboso. So a morbid jumper, she means a soft jumper. If there are any fashion designers out there, please design a morbid jumper. I would buy one immediately. And the last one in this group is naturally stranger. Stranger is from straniero in Italian, actually means foreigner. Stranger in Italian is sconosciuto. Okay, the next one here, as you can see, is basically a misuse of a verb. I took a photo of him instead of, because in Italian it would be the equivalent of made a photo. He had an important nose. Important is a strange one because in 90 or more than 90% of the cases, important and the Italian, also the French word, because also French has the same false friend here, important, importante has the same meaning. However, important in this case obviously means prominent. So we have basically the Italian adjective has a wider range of meanings than the English one, slightly wider. And of course the last one, dark carnation, comes from carnagione, complexion. Here we see another very common mistake, both in Italian, French and Spanish, assisted. Assist in English is in the sense of help, and this is a word that English has imported, but only with one of its many meanings. In various Latin languages, assist also means in the sense of witness, and it could also mean in the sense of participate. So when she said she assisted the robbery, she meant to say she witnessed or saw the robbery. The police were very bad educated from maleducato, but basically she meant bad-mannered or rude. And then it became more sympathetic. Now, sympathetic, as we know in English, is having empathy, compassion for somebody who is suffering, whereas sympathetic in simpatico or Spanish and French and various other Latin languages is the sense of nice, polite, etc. And last but not least, the noisy film from noioso, which in Italian means boring. Okay, now let's see why these things happen. What you can see here is the family tree of the largest group of languages in the world, largest family of languages in the world, the Indo-Europeans. And it is surmised that thousands of years ago, these all come from one original language, Proto-Indo-European. These are the majority of languages in Europe and a very large proportion of languages in Southern Asia, in particular India. We can see that the first branches that spread off were Italic, so the Latin languages, Hellenic, which we still have Greek, Albanian, the Germanic languages, which includes English, Indo-Iranian, and so we've got modern Kurdish and Farsi, and a lot of the Indian languages, Celtic, Armenian, and Balto-Slavic, so another very large family there. Now, naturally, these languages have influenced each other, but one possible reason for shared words is because if you go back far enough, these were the same language. The other reason for false friends is that no language exists in isolation. And in fact, it always makes me laugh when I hear people saying, oh, our language, the purity of our language, whatever language it might be, is being damaged. The only way to have a pure language is for nobody to speak it, so it never changes, like many of the languages here, or for that language to be spoken by a population in an isolated part of the world where it's never visited by anybody else. Human beings are naturally gregarious, and they exchange vocabulary as much as anything else. So a lot of them are what linguists would call loan words. I don't know why they're called loan words, because it's not as if people give them back, but for various reasons, a word that will spread from one language to another. There are other reasons, but let's start with this one. And let's have a few examples. Okay, so let's look at another example. Here we can see the word magazine, which we know in English means a publication, or at least that's the most common meaning. When Tiziana wanted her morbid jumper, she might have asked to go to a grande magazzino or department store, which is also similar in Georgian as univer mahazia. In fact, Georgian for shop is mahazia, whereas Romanian is magazin, and the Ukrainian word is mahazin. I apologize to my ex-colleagues from these countries about my pronunciation, but I'm doing my best. Magazine does have another meaning in English which connects to these, which is, for example, where, as you can see from these images, ammunition is stored in a warship, but also the container of bullets for a repeating gun. Let's look at some other examples of false friends, and here I'm looking at inaccurate imports. What I mean by that, as I said before, is that words are constantly being exchanged between different languages, and very often a word will be imported, for example, into English, but not with the full range of meanings. In the email, Tiziana said that she had assisted the robbery, and the police interpreted that as she was an accomplice, because we know assist in English means to give aid, to help, whereas the Italian verb assistere can mean to give help, but it can also mean to witness. We also have the Spanish word asistir, which means to attend. So the Spanish person might say, I assisted a class. This can also happen in Italian. Let's just take a few more examples. Here we have accurate, which sounds like the Russian akkuratny, but in fact akkuratny in Russian means neat and tidy. If we take the English word insult, it does sound like the Ukrainian word insult, but the problem is the Ukrainian word does not mean insult, but it means a stroke, like to have a stroke, a cerebral hemorrhage. What a difference. So we have seen that two languages might share a word because previously the origins of these two languages were similar and they shared the same word precisely with the same meaning. In other cases, one language has imported a word from another language and either not imported all of the meanings, but just some of them. Sometimes false friends can also occur because of particular episodes in history. If we look at these words and look at the similar sounding words in Japanese, we will find that the words in Japanese were imported from English during the occupation of Japan at the end of the Second World War. And again, most of the English words that were imported had the same meaning, with some exceptions. For example, this word, a mansion, in Japanese means apartment and not a mansion. This other word, and excuse my Japanese pronunciation, mounting, does not mean mounting, like mounting a horse, but boasting or posturing. So there we have it. Words may look the same, they may sound the same in different languages, but they may be either completely different or slightly different. And it is important because you can end up saying something you didn't intend to say. There are occasions where a false friend can give a completely different outcome than that which you intended. When I first arrived in Italy, there was one evening when I was invited to a very pleasant evening at some people's villa in the country, and at the end of the evening I said the Italian equivalent of thanks for a tremendous evening, not knowing that the Italian basically serata tremenda, not knowing that tremenda in Italian means terrible. Also terrific in English is positive and terrifico in Italian is negative. It seems that these two adjectives arrived in English with pretty much the same meaning, but over the centuries changed to being big. So terrific and tremendous, like a tremendous explosion, wasn't a fantastic explosion, but a big, awe-inspiring explosion. And then they gradually evolved into their present meaning. False friends exist between all languages, not just English and other languages. So there are false friends between Spanish and French, between German and Greek, between Japanese and Malay. And so what can we do about them? Well, not a lot, to be honest. It's just a matter of being careful. Whenever you're learning vocabulary, it's useful to have a checklist, all the usual things like meaning, collocation, nuance, but also, is it likely to cause a misunderstanding? This misunderstanding might be very small. For example, important, whereas in French, important, like an important sum of money, can mean a substantial sum of money, whereas in English it's just going to mean high priority. Or it could be something totally different, like eventualmente in Italian, which means maybe, compared to eventually, which means in English, as we know, definitely really, but we don't know when. So the only lesson from this is really be careful. It can be a very dangerous world. Bye for now.